they want to build that out with you. But ultimately, that was sort of the moment where you look in the mirror and you're like, do I want to do this for someone else, or do I want to do this for myself? Take it as a compliment that someone's recognizing the work that you do, and just continue down the path that you set out for yourself.
Hello, my fellow Martians. My name is Harry Mars, and this is the On Mars Pod, where we take a deep dive into creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and other inspiring Martians alike.
If the artist doesn't understand what's going on around them, then it's very easy to make the wrong choices. You sort of learn very quickly what does and doesn't work for you, so that was my opportunity to go and sort of change that and do that for myself. I don't think I planned on it, but when my daughter was born, it sort of just flipped a switch for me.
Hello, my fellow Martians. Today on Mars, we are joined by an entrepreneur, artist manager, and owner-founder of 1717 Management. We got Tim Leftwich in the building. Guys, thank you so much for being here.
No, it's great to be here.
Yes, sir. So we got connected through Caleb Brown and also Charlie Mack.
Yep.
So they are managing Charlie Mack right now. So this is Caleb's boss. So this guy pulled Caleb out of a tough time and came at a right position, right place, right time. And now you guys are building up 1717 and it's going great, man.
Yeah. Honestly, I had no idea of anything that was going on in his life. Just it seemed like a good fit, like a young manager to kind of come in and help develop some of what we got going on.
Absolutely, man. No, I mean, like I said, right place, right time. It was perfect. Divine timing is real, and you needed someone, he needed a place. So it was like
exactly worked out perfectly for everyone.
Yes, man. So you ran businesses, but you've also worked in the industry for a while, and you're from the UK, right?
Yeah, I'm from London.
London. So I mean, just kind of doing research. Where you grew up in Essex, is that?
Yeah, it's like we're born in London and then grew up in Essex, which is like next county over from London as a city.
Okay. So then in your time in London, you went to a grammar school. That's kind of one of like the bigger, a big deal out there. So what were you doing while you were in like school? What were your passions? Were you into music and media and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I played a lot of sport. Grammar schools are like selective schools out there, so you got like test into them, and they're very like sports centric, so do a lot of that. But I mean, there wasn't really anyone musical in my direct family, so music was just something that I just like fell into. I loved it growing up, and I think I begged my parents for a guitar from like the age of 11, and then finally convinced them, and just like saved up money, buy my first guitar, dragged my dad to the shop. Get that like Stag Stratcaster, like the sort of like 80-pound guitar, and the little like box 10 watt amp,
Yeah, that's all you need at that age.
And then just kept playing and loved it. And my cousin, who's actually not blood related, but like just through marriage, he ended up starting a band, and that band did really, really well. We ended up working together later on, and just sort of fueled my passion.
Wait, is that Asking Alexandria?
Yeah.
Oh shoot! So you grew up with those guys?
Yeah. So Ben, who's now left the band, is my cousin through my uncle, and which I just sort of like watched him develop that band. He was living in Dubai when we were kids, but every time we go out there to see family, me and him would just sort of like pick up guitars, play, and I watched him like with those like Tascam like 8-track recorders as a teenager, just sort of like recording his like early versions of what that band became.
Wow, damn! So you were there watching all that develop behind the scenes, and I mean, he's Asking Alexandria, if you don't know, is a very successful group.
Yeah, they've done all right.
Yeah,
over their
so
time.
To be directly fitted and kind of see that side while you're still in London in the UK, and I mean, that was eventually. I mean, we'll get to this at some point in this interview, but like that was eventually your bridge to come to the US, right? So man. So I mean, before that, so you're in school, you're playing music, and you never really did you ever like start bands or anything like that?
I played in a couple. I mean, I feel like everyone does at some point. Like if you pick up a guitar or something, like I had a couple, but nothing really like worth shouting about. It's just like friends playing in a few bands, mess around, play some shows, but nothing crazy.
Today's episode is sponsored by Lantern Coffee, based out of my hometown, Grand Rapids, Michigan. If you're still sipping on that gas station coffee, this is your sign to get your life together. Lantern does coffee the right way. Whole beans, small batch, straight from the source. I personally get 2 bags a month myself. It's what fuels us here every day on Mars. If you want to taste what I'm talking about, go to lanterncoffee.com, use promo code ONMARS for 20% off of your first order. That's lanterncoffee.com, use promo code ONMARS, 20% off your first order. Treat yourself, because friends don't let friends drink bad coffee. Let's get back to the show. Got you. Okay. So then getting to a point in, what was it, like 2013, I think you started working for Tomorrow Magazine, that whole group. And what was your role there? I mean, you were doing like what was it, like marketing and like what were you doing at that role?
Yeah, it was sort of a mix, because it was a small operation, but it was with a bigger PR firm. So they did a lot of work with musicians. We had, like, that was sort of the driving force for, who they wanted to get on covers. They wanted like big musicians or high profile actors and things like that. And so we were doing marketing, but a lot of it was honestly just a collaborative effort to try and like pull people in, do some interviews, and just sort of develop that brand. And that magazine ended up doing pretty well for itself over a period of time. But yeah, it was my way of, like, because I was touring on the side a lot, and it was just my way of like bridging that gap and like doing some other stuff on the business side.
Okay, so your love of music kind of brought you to that company. I mean, so did you just apply, or were you just like a?
It was just a mutual connection.
Okay.
I met someone, and it was sort of the early days of that magazine, and he asked if I wanted to get involved in some capacity.
Okay. So then being there, that kind of exposed you to like the business side. And was that like, did that plant some seeds where you're just like, okay, I kind of want to go deeper into the business side versus like the art side?
Yeah, because I was touring on the side, so it was sort of like part-time. It was like I was working as a touring professional as well as working for that magazine. So, like from 19, 20 on, I was going out and like selling merch on the lowest end, for different bands' tours. And then this was sort of that extra role that helped fuel and just like keep driving what I wanted to do on the business side, and find a role outside of the touring world and dive more into the sort of professional business side of music.
Absolutely. And when you were touring with these guys, what kind of bands were you working with? Like just London acts?
It was just a mix of like different rock bands that would sort of tour UK and Europe. So, like van tours that you'd jump in, and different roles out there, like started with merch and ended up tour managing for a few smaller bands, and that again like helped fuel and drive that jump to get into the more professional side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because you ended up like, I mean, when you ended up going with Asking Alexandria, you were working with the merch, and because you already had the experience by the time you actually got that position too. So that's really important too.
Yeah, it was that sort of came about because it's like, you want to. We didn't want to like trade favors. Me and my cousin at that point, and that band was already doing so well. It was very much sort of like a right place, right time. If it makes sense for the role that we want, we would work together. But it was never about like just pulling a favor.
Yeah, that's important, especially when I guess like the nepotism type thing is a real. They're like, oh, he only got that because he's his cousin.
Yeah,
it's just like no. I'm
like,
actually
I've done the work. I know what I'm talking about now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, especially for the other people involved with like the business. It's good for them to like know that, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. It's just not like a family connection.
Yeah, like no one wants to be that guy that's just sort of like, oh well, my cousins do it great, so here I am.
Yeah, that's right. You're like riding on his coattails or whatever. Nice. So that was, what was it, 2015, I think is what it was.
Yeah, because I'd come out and done Warped Tour, and we made that switch, and we've been talking about me going over to the States permanently.
Nice. So you've been in the States about 10 years then now.
Yeah.
Nice, dude. So I guess in that time you also started getting like affiliated with some other things going on in the industry, and you kind of started working with another group. So what was that like managing, like working with Asking Alexandria for as long as you were working with them, from like 2015, 2017 all the way up to like I think 2019 or whenever it was? Like,
it was sort of stopped working with them around sort of COVID time.
Yeah. Okay.
When everything sort of paused, that was the transition away from that.
Okay.
But I mean, it's great. I mean, like that when you're working at that level, there's a whole different process, and there's a lot of people involved
Mm-hmm.
in bands like that. It's not just one person that's running point. There's a whole team involved. You've got obviously their label side,
Mm-hmm.
managerial team, business management team, legal team, publicists, marketing teams, and there's a lot of people for a band at that size to operate at the level that they do.
Okay.
So it was a great great period of time. There was a lot going on for the band during that period as well. So it was a very busy period for everyone.
Yeah. So that 4 years that you were working with them, so you did see like a promotion about like 2 years in or something like that to like operations manager versus just like merchandising
Yeah, because we were
operations.
building a whole side for them, and their merch operation is. I'm sure you can imagine a band of that size. There's a lot of money
Yeah.
changing hands, and the merch side is pretty big.
Yeah.
It's quite significant for that style of band
Mm-hmm.
and the size as well. So we were looking to just continue to build that out and just become more integral in that team.
Nice, dude. It's important that you were able to experience it on that level. So you can kind of obviously utilize connections that you've made with your other experience, but then like once you get into a position where you're now managing artists and stuff like that, and I do kind of want to talk about like working for that other management company,
Mhm.
and what was your, I mean, how did you get connected with like that company? I the name slips me, but Powerline Management.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Powerline Management, what was that experience
Yeah, I
like?
mean, I'd also on the side. I mean, it doesn't. I don't really bring it up or have it plastered anywhere, but I'd been managing other bands on the side during this whole time. So
Gotcha.
I'd been developing smaller artists and working with other companies, and then Powerline was one of the more significant ones that I joined, and that was again that was sort of off the back of the work with Asking Alexandria. That whole
Gotcha.
community of companies and management all know each other. And they asked if I would come on board and start working with some of these artists. They'd seen some of the other stuff that was going on, some of the stuff that I was doing for Asking, and
Mm.
asked if I would come on and sort of manage some of that roster and develop it.
Okay, that makes sense. So it was something that you were already doing
Yeah,
before they even approached you.
yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. So I guess like how did you get into managing artists then? Like even though you were doing it by yourself on the side, like what was that process like?
I mean, honestly, it's sort of like it started so long ago. You sort of lose track of exactly like how you
Right.
fell into it. But I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of that was really just having still been a part of the community in some capacity and working with different companies. There were always those like developing bands that like, hey, like we need some help, and we feel like you'd be a good fit to try and help us do that. And through the work that I'd done with other companies, you start to build up a pretty deep network
Mhm.
of whether it's like magazines, labels that you're working with in order to work with like certain talent, like at the magazine, for example,
Right.
like we have to interface with those management teams and record labels. And you start to just build a deep network of people.
That makes sense.
So some of the smaller bands that are developing are like, hey, we need help and we feel like you'd be good at this role for us. And that's sort of where it started and began.
Hey, Martians, real quick. I appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch wherever you are in the world. Over the last few months, the Martian family has grown so much. I could not be more thankful for all of my guests and every single one of you who continue to tune in every single week. Subscribers, ratings, likes, and comments all help us grow here on Mars. And it would mean the world. If you haven't already, please go to onmarspod.com/subscribe to subscribe on YouTube. Like and leave a comment, rate us on Spotify. All this good stuff helps keep the engine running to inspire Martians all over the world. P.S. Follow us on Instagram at OnMarsPod. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, cool. So it was like while you're working in the industry, not even necessarily for management, but you just started like meeting managers,
Yeah.
meeting label execs, and you're like, oh, I could maybe be
Like
this
I
guy.
feel like I
I could
can,
do
yeah, I feel
this.
like I could do something with this.
Yeah, that's cool. But so did you ever really like have like the entrepreneurial mindset at like a younger age, like starting companies? Was that ever like something that you wanted to do as a kid, or did you just kind of fall into it because you're like, well, I don't want to work for somebody anymore. I want to do this by myself later on.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree. I mean, I think it was just sort of like you surround yourself with like-minded people. So whether it's you wanting to start a company or be a part of something that can become bigger, it's that sort of mindset. And I had always had that approach to things, and just wanting to be around other people that you feel like operate at the same level or more. I try to spend a lot of my time when I was younger, surrounding myself with people that were obviously like much more successful than I was in that field, and sort of just like, watch and learn and see how they navigate and operate through the industry that they're in.
Yeah, that's super smart. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of creatives should do is, be in the room with people that are more talented than you. So that way you can learn from these people, take, things that they do that you never even would have thought of.
Yeah, and a lot of it honestly was like it was just listening. I tried really not to open my mouth a lot around these people. It's like I just wanted to sit, listen, and then sort of start to form, my views and opinions and approach to things. May or may not be the same as the people you're with, but you start to sort of absorb everything that you're seeing, and you can start to develop your own approach to things. And I felt like that was really important. I didn't want to try and present myself as something bigger than I was. I wanted to just learn from people. And so that's like just sit in the back, listen to the conversation going on around you, and start to learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I mean, there's an art to growing in that with that mindset of like listening before you speak and building up your own way of doing things from being inspired by other people that are doing it at a high level. And I think you can like copy paste, but not everything's gonna work for everyone. So in the same way that like you can be inspired by other artists, but it's like you're never gonna make music just like them. You kind of got to find your own style.
Yeah, and I mean, you see it a lot on the management side. Like everyone has a different style of management, and you're not going to necessarily replicate that. I mean, you can kind of pick up best practices from people, but you're always going to have your own way of doing things. It's not going to be a perfect carbon copy of what another manager is doing, you know? So it is important to just sort of like watch, observe, and see how you want to manage or see how you want to run business, but also as much as you're learning that, to learn what you don't want to do as well.
Yeah, that's so smart. And I'm sure that working with, Powerline and being involved with a management company that's already doing it, that allowed you to not only grow in your own way, but then see how other managers are operating, be like, well, I wouldn't do it like that.
Yeah, I mean, and Zach, who runs that company, was great. It was perfect timing. He had me come in, and we started working on some really cool bands and some really cool projects together. He did at the time and still looks after bands like Escape the Fate, and
okay.
They're great bands, and does a great job with them. And it was like learning sort of his operation, because there's also a big difference between managing in the UK and the US. There's some small nuance difference, but there's also the industry is run differently. So I was also trying to like learn a little bit more about how they tend to operate on the management side in the US at the time. So that was very, very helpful for me.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the beginning of your time out here in the US. So to be able to kind of get the nuances of the American industry in the record side. Were you working with mainly like rock bands and stuff like that? Kind of because of the nature of the work that you were already doing?
That's sort of like where pretty much my entire network of contacts had been, and come over here. And that's where, honestly, that was my love in music as well. Like I loved rock and metal growing up. So that was sort of where I started. And later on, I tried to diversify, because everyone has different musical interests. I don't just listen to metal like I did when I was 15.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was predominantly, and to my knowledge as well, they are still predominantly rock and metal based as well. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So then getting to a point in, what was it, like, I think it was December of 2019, you basically left everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm going to do this by myself. I'm going to be self-employed. So it was January of 2020, right before the shit hit the fan with COVID. And what was that transition like, going into a place where you're like, okay, I'm ready to take this all on myself?
Yeah, I think it was just, I'd spent a lot of time around a lot of people, and that's when my approach towards things started to differ to what other people were doing. And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm gonna try and make a name or a reputation for myself in the industry, it's great working under other people, but I want to try and go out there and apply some of what I think that I have learned, and the style with which I like to work with people.
Okay.
Kind of made that jump. Terrible timing, given 2 months later, basically the whole industry shuts down for like essentially a year. So I just sort of sat there like, damn, that really backfired on me. But you can't help that, a global pandemic. So what can I do about it? So timing wise, I mean, it felt like the right time for me to start branching out and making a name for myself. Just other plans get in the way, other things sort of happen, and the whole industry shut down for like a year at that point, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, what was that time like where it was like those first like 2, 3 months or whatever? Were you actually making moves pretty quickly, and like did it happen fast for you?
Yeah, I had started working with some artists that I felt would be a good fit, and things were starting to move quite rapidly. I mean, your management is a purely commission based
Yeah,
career
right.
for the most part. If you're running it yourself, and things felt great, moving at a pretty quick pace, and starting to build what I saw as the kind of roster that I would want to have at that time, predominantly again in the rock space. Um, and it moves at a pretty fast pace when you're trying to bring on enough clients where you think that you can actually, one, make a living, but two, operate
Hmm.
and be efficient for these guys. The first 2 months were great, and then that's when everything shuts down, and I
Okay.
had to sort of like reevaluate and think like, okay, well, how are we going to navigate the next year with
Yeah,
these? Because the artists are in the same position that you are. They have to make money to survive. No one's, unless you're working with a very large artist, and I think people misrepresent how big you have to be to really be making the kind of money that everyone thinks musicians make. So unless you're very significant in size, a year of trying to subsidize yourself when the industry shut down is expensive
for sure. Yeah, and it could be a death sentence too. Like some
for
people.
a lot
Yeah.
of artists. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that were making music before COVID that once COVID happened, they're like, "Well, can't do that anymore."
Yeah, they had to sort of like go back to getting what they considered like a real job.
Yeah, like
They're
9
like,
to 5 work.
yeah, they're like, a lot of people ended up trying to get like office jobs or part-time stuff or online work, like whatever they could.
Yeah, did you ever have to get into that position being, like, self-employed? Did you ever have to kinda take a step back and take, any type of bullshit 9 to 5s to keep the lights on?
Thankfully, no. I sort of looked at it as an opportunity to demonstrate what you're capable of
Mm,
as a manager, and how to help artists navigate continuing like basically remaining independent in that situation.
wow,
Um,
it's
Very,
bold.
very quickly, a few things presented themselves where artists were able to do like online live streams, and there's obviously the I typically preach to artists now that touring is essential if you want to become an artist that's a mainstay.
Yeah.
But at that time, you have to navigate it differently, and we found other opportunities. I mean, a great example is what the Madden brothers did. They started Veeps, which was an online, essentially like live performance,
Mm,
live streaming, and they built that into. I think they sold half of it a couple of years ago to Live Nation for like $40 million or something.
jeez.
So, they were a great example of like, what
Right.
you could do. And a lot of bands were going out there and basically like going to an empty, closed venue and set up a live stream and stream it to audiences around the world. And it helped a lot.
Damn, so you took a position of like, "Well, let's not take this as a death sentence, let's see how we can adapt with the
Yeah.
pandemic and still make it successful."
Yeah. I mean, look, like people were still going to stream music on Spotify, right? If
Yeah.
anything, people did it more.
Right, for sure.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like if we've got the capacity to continue making music solo, like a lot of it is like you can't go into production studios, and
Mhm.
people can necessarily work with each other. We did it as like, okay, well, let's try and do like online sessions between people. Let's do like
Mm.
writing sessions over Zoom. Let's try
Ooh.
and self-produce. Let's try and do live streams. We try to get people using platforms like Twitch and just connect with their audience in some capacity.
Yeah.
And for the people that had the mindset to do it, it made great money still during that time.
Wow, damn. So, yeah, in a way, you kind of like saw like a new lane during all the bad shit. So it's pretty nice that you were able to be self-employed in that moment to have like the flexibility to like move the way that you wanted to move. So that way you can make certain decisions that maybe
Yeah.
you wouldn't have made if you were working under somebody else.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Like you learn, your style of things. There's a sort of element of freedom that you get, when you're going out by yourself. When you work for another company, especially management, they have their process, they have
Right.
their style. It's like that's the genre of music that we want to specialize in. This is our typical approach to things. We want you to do it this way, and I do that same thing now, running
Mhm.
my management company, I have a sort of standard practice that I like people to meet. But you sort of learn very quickly what does and doesn't work for you. So that was my opportunity to go and sort of change that and do that for myself.
Yeah, for sure. And all of this stuff during COVID, it was not necessarily like branded under like a company name. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
it was me just sort of solo. I didn't really see the need. I wasn't trying to at the time necessarily build an agency of any sorts.
Mhm.
There are a lot of managers out there that operate just, under their own name as their
Right.
sort of moniker, or they're just independent managers. I
Yeah,
didn't really see the need at that time to
for
have
sure.
anything branded.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, especially when you're still kind of figuring out your style and
Yeah,
figuring out how you would build the systems if you were gonna have a roster
exactly.
anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's important. I love that you took the opportunity to learn and grow within COVID because I think that's something that, like I said, like it could have been a death sentence for you. And it's like, especially being like
Yeah.
so like freshly jump shipped all like all of your like consistent money and just like, oh shit.
Yeah, I know. It's tough, and obviously, like, you don't know that that's coming, but you do
Yeah.
ultimately have to be prepared for just about anything in that situation if you are going to go out on your own.
Yeah.
I don't think I had the foresight to think that an entire world, global pandemic was going to shut down every industry.
No,
Like,
yeah, no one would
not
have
really
predicted
thinking
that.
about that
Yeah.
as a thing, but yeah,
Gotta be ready for everything.
yeah, I'm like didn't when they say you have to be ready for anything, I was like, I didn't think that was something that was included in anything, but that yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what happens, and I know I
Yeah.
wasn't the only one. I mean, there were plenty of other people that I knew that were in the same boat, and you just you have to look at it as like you're either going to let it ruin you or you use it as an opportunity to try and define how you're going to function,
Mhm.
especially in a management role.
Yeah.
You sort of have to piece everything together for someone in their career. So you're
Mhm.
either going to demonstrate that and lead with that mentality, or you're going to basically just be like, well, shit.
Yeah, totally. No, you're so right. You're so right, especially when they're looking to you for that leadership. If you're folding, what kind of
Yeah.
confidence are they gonna have in their own
Well, yeah, and
Yeah. Yeah.
how is anyone ever going to want to work with you or sign with you if you were just like, well, I guess I'll just pack up my stuff.
Yeah,
Cool.
totally.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's like, yeah, the opposite of what you're trying to like show people. Like you can't,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. You have to like live it. You can't just say it, you know? And I think that's one of those examples where you kind of taking the initiative to find new opportunities for these artists and see like, well, yeah, this can't work, but that doesn't mean that this other thing can't work. You know, the Twitch streaming and being like, that getting into the live stream concerts. I feel like that's another thing. I mean, like comedians, I feel like, and musicians kind of had like a similar thing where their bread and butter was in like live
hmm
performances. So it's like how comedians shifted to doing like parking lot shows and shit like that, where it's like people would honk in their car. It's like that's the kind of stuff where the comedians that are now successful, they had to pivot in those times too. And I think that's the same thing like with a
yeah.
lot of musicians in that time. Like they probably made a lot of careers and also kind of destroyed a lot of careers at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Like, as a musician, your reason for being is to try and get on stage and perform to
Hmm.
crowds, and when that's taken away from you, it's very easy to maybe look at it and go like, "Well, damn, what do I? This is all I've ever known. What do I do?" And very quickly you could see the artists that stood out from the pack, and the artists that used it as an opportunity to stay connected with fans, do different things. The live streaming became a big thing. I mean, there were multiple companies that came and were sort of spawned off the back of that have done extremely well and continue to do well because now they can sort of service globally
Yeah.
for you know eh, crowds. I guess like anywhere where an artist isn't touring, they are extremely valuable.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it in a way kind of made new opportunities from having to do it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think when you look at like a live stream company getting sold for the amount that Madden Brothers sold, you start to see that there's real value in that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, now we're seeing like Twitch, for instance, like that was, I don't know how, if you were watching Twitch back when it was like 2017, 18, like the video game streaming time or whatever. That was like the beginning
Yeah,
of it kind of.
I think I started watching people on Twitch probably like I'll say maybe like 2018.
Okay, yeah. So right around that time,
Yeah.
yeah. With like, because I think it was I talked about it with Caleb, the like the Ninja and Drake, Travis Scott
Yep.
stream. That's kind of blew the doors off of Twitch when people are like, oh shit, like there's money here.
Yeah. One, I think there was also video games like Fortnite
Yes.
started to set a precedent too. You know, you had like their Marshmallow concert. You had was it that Astro World
the Travis
launch
Scott
that they did?
Yeah.
And that stuff started to show you. Obviously, those artists are operating at a different level, but it did start to show people it's like there is a whole new world available to us. You know, like video games and music have always been intrinsically tied.
Yeah.
But it started to present new opportunity for them. So
wow,
Twitch was a cool one to watch. A lot of musicians sort of pivot to, especially around the COVID time. There are a bunch now that still use Twitch regularly and stream all the time. Craig Mabbitt in Escape the Fate is a good example. He streams regularly with video games.
Wow.
And just does it on the side when he's not touring.
Hey, and that's another revenue stream for him, and it's fun.
And it's another way for fans to connect too, right?
Sure,
you know, like
level,
you're sort of seeing a different side,
absolutely,
of the musician that you love. You know, you connect with a band from their music, but you start to learn more about the artist, and fans, you know, love having a sort of deeper connection to the artist that they follow, and Twitch is a great way to sort of show another side of what you're interested in.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of artists that play a lot of video games because you're on a tour bus all the time.
Yes.
You know, so that was a good thing for them to do at home.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's you get to see like the human side of them. It's like, oh, this is just a guy. This is just a guy playing video games. You know, it's like
that is a lot of it. I mean, like when fans meet artists, you know, it can be a sort of obsession, and people were, you know, like, you changed my life, or you saved my life. And then, you know, when you're doing it on the professional side, I'm like, I know what they're like behind the scenes. They're not that cool. Like, they're fine.
They're all right.
I'm like, I promise you, he's a massive nerd.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So that's kind of like an unfiltered way for people to see their favorite artists behind, you know, just a webcam and a mic, you know, just playing video games in the room.
Yeah, you're just seeing a different side of them and see what they're like at home, basically.
Yeah, man. So then during, you know, the time when you're doing this by yourself, you're working with a lot of artists. And are you primarily working with like local acts during like 2020 to before you started in 2023 with other people?
I mean, it was a mix. I had a couple sort of like local, but a couple more well-known and reputable artists.
Just through other connections that you already had.
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously from managing a power line, you know, you build obviously like a deeper network through working for another company and an established manager, and, you know, work with different labels and different management teams across the board. So I had artists that were sort of a mix. You know, I wanted to position myself where I had a couple that makes sense financially, but also a few that you can sort of develop and try and build into being that artist from the ground up.
Yeah, like passion projects, kind of, because you were a fan of their work.
Yeah, you know, like you see what they're trying to build, like their approach and their mentality, and so you try and, you know, like help guide them to the next level. And at the same time, you know, you've got artists that are already doing it, so you can sort of demonstrate to them, you know, the right way of approaching their career.
Yeah, especially when you have both artists or both types of artists on your roster, you can be like, hey, like to the lesser known artist, be like, yo, this guy's doing things like this and it's been successful for him.
Yeah.
Why don't we try that with you?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, dude. So, I mean, there's a point in time where you started briefly working with Futuristic.
Yeah.
When he was doing his Never Too Late rock project. So that's actually when I connected with Zach, and because my homie's This Modern. Have you ever heard of This Modern? Yeah. So yeah, because I know that you follow them, and so I was like, I just didn't know if like you're like personally connected. Because Marcus, the lead singer, he's one of my best friends.
Sure.
So he's actually like the first person that I really met out here when I moved out here almost 11 years ago. So it's kind of like it goes pretty deep. Like I've worked with him since 2015, so it's pretty wild. But they produced that whole project with him and. So I just want to talk about like working with an artist like Futuristic who kind of already kind of does it himself. A lot of this stuff.
Fiercely independent is how I would describe him.
Fiercely independent is the best way to put it. I mean, he's from the beginning been a very DIY guy. So I guess like working with someone with that kind of energy, what was that relationship like, especially when you're trying to manage someone who's kind of like managing themselves in a way?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, obviously we didn't really work with each other for a very long time. I think purely because he is a fiercely independent artist. He's essentially managing his own career. That was more about, I think, making some of the connections on the rock side and understanding and having someone involved in some capacity who understands the rock element. That's out of his traditional comfort zone. So I think that was more about being like, hey, this is how typically rock artists and labels tend to operate, and this is how you kind of need to move through that.
That makes sense. So because he was making that kind of trying to take a pivot into a world that he didn't really understand, he consulted
Yeah,
you.
and that he did features with bands like Magnolia Park
Right.
and Loveless and people
Yep.
like that, and they just sort of operate in a different way. Like the record labels operate in a different way to how someone from like a sort of rap and hip hop background would.
Yeah.
And those artists are not independent, so you have to sort of maneuver in the right way. And I think that was more about making that connection and understanding that than it was about necessarily managing the direct career, because he is so independent in that sense and had already been doing it that way, has his systems, has his approach to things. That was more about understanding, I think, that genre.
I get that. I was wondering because I was like, I wasn't sure if you had like reached out to him to try to manage or like if he reached out to you, but it sounds like he probably reached out to you because of the fact that you already had
Yeah, it was sort of
the
like
connections in the
a mutual
space.
connection had connected the two of us, and,
Okay.
and and then it was like, okay, that makes sense to try and like have someone on board for this and see if it works. Like the true definition of an entrepreneur. It's
Hmm.
not just a musician. So he's a really interesting person to look at as a sort of case study for things.
Yeah, for sure, dude. So during that process, how long were you working with him? Just for like the run of the album, or like like what
Yeah,
was
I mean, I think it was probably total around a period of like a year. It was really just that sort of run of the album, and I think he sort of took a step back from that as like, okay, I've tried that. I am probably better in the lane that I'm familiar with, and this is sort of like, because I think that came about because he, like anyone, has interest in other genres of music.
Mhm.
So you're trying different things, and then I think he sort of establishes like that was cool. I like that project, but it doesn't necessarily fit the fan base that I have,
Mhm.
and sort of go back to his roots, and at that point, it doesn't make sense to manage a project that is something that he already knows
Yeah,
at at every level. So it was really just for the time span of that album and rollout.
for sure. Well, nice, man. So then getting to a point after working with Zach, now we're talking like end of 2022, getting into 2023, you kind of start making 1717.
Yeah. I mean, so I had obviously been managing artists throughout that whole period and starting to try and really grow. And then what would it be? I guess it would be the end of 2023. I've lost all track of
Time,
time
yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
It would have been, the end of 2023 is when I officially started 1717 as a company that I wanted to grow and bring like real artists on board with.
So then what was the moment where you're like, I'm ready to make a company versus just do this independently?
I think it was just, the sort of level of talent that you're starting to attract, through one capacity or another. Whatever work you're doing starts to resonate with other artists, and at the point where you're bringing on artists that are making a real amount of money, like something tangible,
Yeah.
that's when you look at it and you go like, okay, so both logistically and financially, it makes sense to start building this into a bigger company.
Okay, for sure. So all the connections and all the things that you've done in the past, you're like, okay, it's time.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'd had a few sort of offers or encouragement to go work for other management companies again, and bigger companies where you can take your roster on, and they want to build that out with you. But ultimately, that was sort of the moment where you look in the mirror and you're like, do I want to do this for someone else, or do I want to do this myself?
Okay. So it was kind of like a fork in the road where you're like, I could just do this all. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, with all the connections that I already have, all the experience that you've had to up to that point. I mean, at that point, you've effectively been in the industry for almost 10 years.
Yeah,
So
and
it's like,
yeah, and
yeah,
when someone presents you with options where they're sort of like, "Hey, come work for us, bring your roster, we'll pay you a salary." It's very easy to look at that and go, "Oh, that's comfy. I could
yeah,
take that.
comfy.
That'll
Yeah.
that'll work." Um, I don't think I have the capacity. I don't know whether it's just I'm bad at listening to people, or just again like where it describes Zach as fiercely independent.
Yeah.
typically tend to be the same way.
Yeah.
So I sort of look at that and I'm like, I could do that and that would be very comfortable, but I don't think I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve
For sure.
if I go down that path.
Absolutely. And it's a long-term mindset too, where you're like, I don't see myself working with them forever, so why would I even
Yeah.
work with them?
Yeah,
You know what I
that's
mean?
it. You're like, I mean, I would be a manager at that company and they're big companies and they're very reputable companies, but you're not really running it. You are always going to be working for someone else. I'm sure there would be other opportunities down the line to again branch out as other people do, but ultimately I saw it as I'm either going to work for someone else or I'm going to work for myself. What would I rather do in this situation?
Yeah. Straight up entrepreneur. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, if you ask my partner about me, she'll tell you that like I think the thing that she both loves and hates about me the most is that I basically do whatever I want whenever I want to do it, and no one's going to be able to convince me to do it otherwise.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it
As a
seems to
it's
seems to work out so far
sure.
for now.
For sure. As a business owner, you kind of need to have that that drive and confidence in your own decisions, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like if you don't back yourself, why is someone else going to back you?
That's
You
so
know,
true.
and why is an artist going to believe in your role as a manager and your ability to help their career if you aren't willing to do the same for yourself?
For sure. Absolutely, man. And I think the mindset that you took, when you were getting these offers and you had the opportunity to just hang it up and just go work a comfy job, the fact that you didn't do that and the
Yeah,
fact that you took the initiative to, I'm just going to do this myself and do it the right way, whatever that looks like for you. That's something that I'm sure a lot of artists can see and be like, oh, this guy, he's
yeah. And I
confident.
mean, I've had offers to work for other companies since I've started 1717 as well.
Oh, wow.
But again, it's that you're like running a company is hard work, but do I want to just pack in already, what I set out to do for myself? And again, like offers can come in and they're very attractive, and you can sit down and have very interesting conversations with other management teams. But again, I just saw it as take it as a compliment that someone's recognizing the work that you do, and just continue down the path that you set out for yourself.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. When the offers come in, you're like, well, that means I'm doing something right.
Yeah, I was like, I must be doing something okay if someone
Yeah.
wants you to work for them. So,
Yeah.
but no, it doesn't give you the capacity to do what you want. And I think you
Yeah.
also, for someone like myself, where I've wanted to expand into other genres and break out from just where I had been working in rock and metal exclusively,
Right.
I didn't think that I would be afforded that luxury working for another company, because they tend to have, like the artists that they want to work with and the lane that they've carved out for themselves.
For sure.
So I wasn't going to be able to do that. And that was a big sort of like red flag for me.
Absolutely. And I mean, the way that Caleb kind of described it is you guys are branching out to a point where you're kind of like the CAAs and those types of,
Yeah,
agencies.
he was very nice about that. We're nowhere near that, but it's nice that he has that level of faith. Those are like dominant forces in the industry, and there's a lot of other independent companies out there.
Yeah.
But the goal is to get there, right? I mean,
Diversify,
I think
though.
it's like
Yeah.
I think like if you ask a lot of management companies, like what they're trying to achieve, they'll probably tell you the same thing. And a lot of them, they either build up a reputation for themselves, or a lot of them get purchased by those bigger companies. There are a lot of smaller, I guess, like indie managers that have been absorbed by those companies, and it's easy to see the attraction of that. The goal is to not do that and to try and build the agency up to a very, very high level. It's very nice that Caleb thinks that like that's where we're going. Great belief, I guess.
That's the type of energy we need.
Yeah, no, I mean it's great when like your own staff have that faith in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But there's a long way to go before that it reaches that level, though.
Yeah, but going into it with the mindset of like, I'm not just gonna do music. You guys are diversifying the portfolio, as they say, and kind of starting with that mindset of we don't just do this. I think that's very important. And starting the company, I mean, this is kind of just like like what does 1717 mean? Like, what is that? What is that significance?
Yeah, that was actually an interesting one, because I was in Texas with my partner at her mum's house, and we were discussing, like, what am I going to call this thing? Like, if I'm doing this, like, what am I going to call it? And every management company sort of got their own thing. Some are named after, like, the street that someone grew up, or it's just a random name, or it's just something cool. And I was like, I want to find something that really resonates with me. And I don't honestly know if it's funny or not, but I just sort of like, I really don't necessarily believe in like lucky numbers and things like that or anything. But my partner's mom's sitting there, and she's like, she really believes in a lot of this stuff, and is like, well, hey, let's look at your numbers. Like, what are the, like, your lucky numbers? If we take this and this, and it was like 17, and I look it up, and it I think it meant something like, it's like new beginnings and like taking your own path, and I was like, it's weirdly appropriate.
Yeah.
So my thought process was, okay, I'm going to take that number and I'm going to double down on it, and then that's where it came from.
Wow. So how did she find that number?
I can't remember the exact path that she took to get the number, but it was like, it's like different dates related for your birthday or something, or different things. Like, she knows more, obviously, like way more about that, and I just sort of listened and was like, okay, that's the number. And I didn't really think of anything of it, and then I look up like what it meant, and I was like, ugh, it's like annoyingly appropriate.
Yeah, so like, I don't want to believe this, but
it's like, I really don't believe in this stuff, but like, damn,
you got me.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, and then I was like, let's double down on it and like make it a thing.
Okay, so your partner in Texas, are they still out there?
She lives here. We have a child together. So
so there's what? Okay, so your baby mama.
Yep.
Okay, so is she from Texas? Is that?
Yeah. She's from San Antonio. So
nice.
Yeah, she's just we met a few years ago, and then I convinced her to move to Arizona.
Oh, nice.
Fool.
So you were just visiting out there with her family, was that when you came up with the company?
Yeah, we were out there. I'd basically been discussing with her that I want to make that move and start the company. We just happened to be visiting her mom at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I was just sort of sitting there, and we're like, let's think of a name for this thing. And I'm she's asking me like, well, what would you call it? Like, where do you want the name to be from? Like, are you just going to make something up? I'm like, I want to just make something up. I think, like, I want it to resonate with me. So I just couldn't think what that was for the life of me. I was trying to think of anything, and I just couldn't land on anything that I was happy with. And then that came about, and I was like, okay.
No,
all right, that works.
That's awesome, man. And the fact that it actually means something, I think, is very important. And it's like your angel number or whatever, as they say.
I was like, is that what it is? I was like, I couldn't honestly really remember. She just sort of presented numbers in front of me, and I'm like, I guess that's the one, isn't it? Like,
yeah, they're like, well, what time exactly were you born, and what was the moon phase?
Yeah, it's like when you start
dating
someone, and they ask you what time you're born, and you text your mom, and they're like, no, run
away.
Yep.
That's such a classic thing. Just like, if she's asking you about what time you were born, get out of there.
Yeah, I'm like, and then there we are. It's like the birth of my company.
Yeah, for sure. So it actually worked out, dude. So that was in 2023, and I guess getting to that point, like, what were like the first artists that you were working with when running 17 or starting 17?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of flagship artist that sort of came on board with that company at the beginning was Luya. Really, really awesome artist, great human being.
Yeah.
He was trying to make a transition away from his management. He'd been sort of like, I guess, like indie for a small amount of time, and was looking for new management. And we got introduced. We had a conversation. And he was probably the first that was like officially under that moniker.
Is he from Arizona, or where's he
from
based?
Jersey.
Okay, so is he based in the West Coast now, or is he still living in Jersey?
Yeah, he's still in Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I honestly, I think in terms of artists that we have out this way, I don't know, maybe there's like one that's from Arizona.
Oh, wow.
So
a lot of your stuff are remote connections.
Yeah, I mean, like, when you think about, the artists that you're going to find them, and they're like high level artists that are sort of doing what you're looking for. They're just dotted all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot in LA and New York for obvious reasons, but I mean, we've got artists in in Florida, in Jersey, in Nashville, LA. I've got one that's from Slovenia. So, they're all over the place.
Wow. Okay. And that's just, the power of the internet. You
Yeah.
could find talent anywhere.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, like, you're not going
Yeah.
to find every band that you want to work with in the city or the state where you live.
For sure.
There are amazing bands out there and they're from all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And if you can see someone making waves for themselves online too, it's easy to like help them build it up further. Because a lot of times when you're working with just like a local pool of art, you kind of get limited in the amount of people that can be successful too.
Yeah, and there's also, like there's a sort of mentality thing, I think, in every local scene. Like, you're not going to be able to like lift everyone out from that local scene. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I do want to talk about like building like a team around you with 1717. Obviously, anything successful has a team. And I think you were at a position where you knew a lot yourself and you had a lot of experience from your own work. But what kind of approach did you take to selecting your roster on like the management side? How did you build that team?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of came. I mean, I guess I'd been running the company for just over a year at that point, and I had been wanting to bring on other staff and expand, but it is expensive to do that. There's a cost associated with expanding your team. So I had to, like, get myself to a place where I feel like I could do that. B, be in a position where I feel like I can start to like delegate, and also be in a position where I'm managing my artists, but you also have to manage the people that are working for you as well. So I needed to get into a position where I felt comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And then finding the people, I mean, like, I had been looking for people for a long time. Not everyone's the right fit, or what you're doing doesn't necessarily align with what they want to do, and so you're sort of searching for people that you think are going to be the right people. Caleb was the first person that I brought on, and that was really because like he basically explained to me, he's like, I want to manage at a higher level. This is what I've done. This is where I think my expertise are. I need the backing of a company or someone else to sort of learn from and grow. I was like, that's great. That's a good fit right now. I can, take you on, sort of delegate some stuff to you, afford you the opportunity to build a roster and know that you've got some support to do that. And that was the one that made sense. And then from there, everyone else that's come on has been a case of like, we're either going to, absorb the roster that you work with independently and give you a sort of structure, or I just sort of see something with them where I feel like they can grow as a manager, and give them the opportunity to sort of grow their roster with us.
Okay. So then what specific things were you looking for in those people? Like, I mean, even just starting with like Caleb.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about what he was telling you was kind of like a perfect fit, but what were your kind of guidelines to finding those people?
I mean, it's a mix, because I think it sort of depended on whether I was taking someone on that had artists or didn't have artists. The two sort of have different criteria.
Right.
With someone like him, it was a case of I was bringing him on to build a roster for him, and for him to come on and work with other artists. And that was more about someone that was looking to sort of learn underneath you, someone that you can sort of apply best practices to, and be like, hey, like, here's how we're going to do things. This is how I typically like to do it. I want you to work in your own way, but ideally in
Within
that
these
sort of
guidelines.
system.
Yeah.
And someone that was hungry, because like, managers at a different age have a different approach.
Yeah.
You have the guys that are in their 20s that are very hungry. They will travel anywhere, do anything for their artist. And then as you get a bit older, you want to do that a little less, and people are also sort of like stuck in their ways of doing things. So if it's someone that didn't have a roster already, that was more about like, okay, I want you to sort of like grow and learn, and I'm looking for someone that's hungry, that will basically do just about anything for their artist to make something work, and that will apply themselves. If it's someone with a roster already that we're sort of looking to bring in and absorb, it's more about understanding their management style and the connection they have with their artists, and the work that they're already doing.
Right.
And just seeing if that feels like a good fit.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So you were kind of meeting them where they're at in a
Yeah.
sense, with also kind of having like a direction of like where you wanted to take the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially when you got different types of managers that you're part of the pool of people that you could bring on. And that's an interesting point. Like the younger managers and people that have that energy that are like basically like every day of
It's
every
like
hour of every day,
they're
they're
like
like,
puppies.
yeah,
They're like, they're like, oh yeah, what's next? What are we doing? Hey,
right,
let's go.
yeah.
And then, managers in their 30s, like myself, are a little bit more like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And this is how I like to do things.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you're like starting a family and you're
Yeah.
like, you got these different things. And I think delegation and those types of terms is what you need when scaling a company.
Yeah.
So I think that's such an important thing to be able to bring on people like Caleb, where he's already kind of doing things at the level that he was doing them. So you were able to delegate with confidence in a sense.
Yeah, and you can also help them scale and learn more about what's going on. Like
Absolutely.
I recognize there is a risk with taking someone on that doesn't necessarily have all the experience. Um, but it also means that you can sort of teach them the way that you think it should be done.
Mm,
I knew going into this that him coming on board, he didn't necessarily have a ton of label experience,
right.
but almost every one of our artists are on the label.
Right.
So I had to sort of like teach him that system. But you're hoping that that person is going to pick it up quite quickly or understand the approach and essentially do what I did when I was younger and like just sort of sit in the room and listen and
Hmm.
learn.
Hmm.
He's done a good job at that. He's sort of come into his own as a manager by sort of approaching it that way.
Yeah.
And then other managers that we've taken on that already have their artists and work with labels. It's more about just seeing that they operate in a certain way with their artists and they just need a bit more support behind them.
Yeah, for sure. So then putting Caleb in a position with like, for instance, Ro Capara.
Yeah.
That's an artist that you guys work with jointly. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. And that was basically me saying to him, like, this is an artist that's on a very reputable label.
Epitaph, right?
Yeah. And I have a great relationship with them. So I'm like, I'm going to bring you in so that you can see how I sort of navigate things with that team.
Smart.
And then, learn from that. And then that way, if you are bringing on an artist who has a label or, we work with someone else and that's going to be his artist, you know how to maneuver through those rooms and you know
Yeah.
how to talk to people, you know what's expected because there's a different level of work involved when you're working at labels. There's A&Rs, there's product managers. You're gonna like their own marketing team most of the time. You have to deal with a lot of people. I mean, there's anytime we deal with a reasonably sized label, there's probably 15 people on an email thread, and you need to know what each one of those does.
Yeah.
And that's a process for him seeing how we work with Ro and what that looks like to then be able to go and do that independently himself.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that's such a great thing that you're doing for Caleb as like a place of like leadership to say like, yo, I'm gonna do this with you so that way you understand how like there's levels to this shit. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just how it goes. There's levels to this shit.
That's it.
Yeah,
Like there's
it's like
working with a label artist is not like working with a local artist.
absolutely
You
not.
have
Yeah.
to understand
Yeah.
the different way in which you communicate with them and that team
Yeah.
and what's expected of you.
For sure, yeah, to use Ro as kind of like a case study for him to see how it's done in a sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ro just released Good Times.
Yep.
You go stream that?
Yep. Great song.
Yeah, it's a great song. So definitely like still like on his own way, So yeah, talk about like that process of finding artists though. Now, like conversely, we talked about finding managers, but now talk about like what you look for in artists. Caleb kind of talked about his criteria when looking for artists, but I want to like from your point of view, like what do you look for when trying to find an artist?
Millions of dollars. No, it's it's helpful. No, it is honestly a sort of mix. It depends specifically what I'm looking for in that moment too, because the biggest thing for me with this company is that although I want to continue to expand and bring on more artists, what I don't want to do is trap the company in a way where I feel like sometimes other management companies will cannibalize their own roster because you have 15 artists in the same genre in the same space as well, and they're all looking for the same opportunity, and you can only give that to one.
Right.
So part of it is to
Interesting.
expand in a way where I feel like I can use the network that we have in that sort of genre or that specific lane, have a handful of artists in that area, and sort of apply what we have for them without affecting the others.
Yeah.
Last thing you want is artists to sort of hit you up and be like, well, why not me? Why that band? And that's a tough one. Obviously, like when you look at large scale management companies, they have obviously hundreds of artists,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are in the same genre, but you are working at a sort of different level and a different capacity to do that while we're still growing. I don't want to accidentally cannibalize my own artist and my own team.
Wow.
So there's sort of different criteria based on the level that we're looking for and the sort of the genre or what we're trying to do. We've taken on artists who are bigger, more established, and then equally we've taken on artists who are smaller and still somewhat independent. And there's different criteria for each. For me, it's a case of, I think, speaking with that artist, like it starts and stops with the music, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to like the music.
Yes.
We've got to feel some type of way about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no other starting point aside from that. When we've established that we like the artist and that's someone that we want to work with, if they're looking for a team or however that's come about, it then just sort of comes down to, like, if we're talking to someone more established, it's about speaking to them, seeing how they operate, what their expectation is, and essentially what they're looking for in management as much as we are in a client. And I want to understand their mentality and their approach to things.
Yeah.
Every artist wants to be the biggest artist in the world, right? For the
Mhm.
most part.
Yeah. Or they should be.
That's not
Yeah.
always going to happen.
Yeah.
For me, it's then about understanding how they apply themselves, the work they do. Like there are plenty of bands that I've met that, like, I've loved the band. We've had a conversation and their communication has been incredibly poor. And I'm like, that seems like a headache.
It's a red
That
flag,
seems
yeah.
like something that is going to create problems down the line. And that's not something that we want to take on.
Yeah.
I want to learn how they communicate, how they navigate as people and as artists, how they move through their art. And then their sort of understanding and capacity for things. Because if an artist isn't willing to sort of learn, that's also going to be very difficult. You meet a lot of people that, I mean, in any walk of life, right, that are like hard-headed.
Totally.
It's very difficult if an artist is sort of like stuck in their way and like, this is how I do things. And you look at it like, objectively, I disagree. If they're not willing to hear that, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of creatives have, like their way of doing things. So
Yeah.
to almost have like the ability to take criticism and also take direction in a certain sense when it's kind of like realistic, like you're the professional
Mhm.
in that world of like management and connections in that sense. So if someone hasn't got to that point or has like been put in positions where you could put them in, then they should be kind of like listening. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
to a certain degree. You know what I'm saying?
Like you're meant to be there for them, where you can essentially like have a conversation with them, understand the business, and,
Yeah.
and say like, okay, you have your opinion. This is what we think. Maybe meet in the middle,
Right.
do it a different way, but ultimately, you want to be able to have the conversation
Yeah.
about their business and have the artist understand it. If the artist doesn't understand what's going on around them, then it's very easy to make the wrong choices.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to communicate that way and know that the artist sort of reciprocates the same thought process.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily about strong arming him and being like, yo, this is how we have to do it. It's just like, hey, like I get like what you're saying and like I hear that's what you were doing, but like if we did it like this, you could see this.
Yeah, it's I guess it's like you're trying to rationalize with them and be like, hey, like, obviously we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
This is what we know to be true.
Successful.
It doesn't mean that is how it has to be done, but let us have the conversation, give you advice on what we think is the path.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to take that, great. If you don't, that's fine. But know that we've had that conversation. Know that, like we've presented that to you. And if you choose to ignore it, it's okay. We can go do that and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But afford us the time to like sit down, have the conversation about it, and take either choose to take the advice or not.
Right, exactly, and respectfully decline if you don't wanna take it, but
Yeah.
don't, like, blow up and be like,
That's
"Fuck
it.
you!"
Like, oh my god, like,
Yeah.
like how you don't get it, you don't understand. And a lot of artists are like that.
Yeah,
They're like,
the hot-headed
yeah,
type,
you
yeah.
say something to them, and they're like, no, wrong, wrong.
Personally offended.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, well, go do that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
without us.
that's fine. It's like, go do that, see what happens, and then like obviously some artists will recognize it and be like, okay, yeah, that was a mistake.
For sure.
We're not going to get it perfect every
Yeah.
time, but all we're trying to do is use the knowledge that we have as managers and as a team to help an artist understand what the best possible decision that they can make at that time for their
Absolutely.
career. Like what it relative to what we're trying to do,
Mhm.
we just want them to understand the business and know that like we've had that conversation about it.
For sure. So, yeah, it's a mixture of just, like, talent, communication, and also just being, like, a good person that it's
Yeah.
easy to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yep.
Probably, like, holds the most weight is just, like, being able to work with them as, like, a person, you know?
Yeah, and like we want to know that they're willing to put the work in and do the right things. Like touring is a big thing for me with artists. I feel like that um, if you're going to be a legitimate artist long term, you need to be touring and be present with your fan base. And there are artists out there that are like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to tour until I'm at this point. And like, that's a complete waste of what you're doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work like that. Like it's like the internet artists, right? Like there are a lot of artists who off the back of TikTok, and especially like when everyone was in lockdown for COVID, there are a lot of like bedroom artists that really started to blow up online.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I'm gonna wait to play shows until like there's so much demand, everything sells out. And there's some logic to that. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of artists go too far past the point where now people don't really see them as a
Yeah.
touring artist, and they can't really sell tickets. They've become an online artist only.
Wow.
And it's a careful balance. Like there's a logic behind wanting to wait until you know that there is an actual demand, but you go too far and that will disappear.
Wow. So it's like people like in like the stock of like themselves, they like see it rising and rising and rising. They just want to see it go like so far to the point where they're just going to make a bunch of money. But it's like if you don't capitalize on that rise, kind of when you're hot
Yeah.
online and come out to the people, show them that you're, doing live shows, then you kind of miss that window of opportunity.
Yeah, because I think a lot of those artists were like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna do it where I can just jump straight into theater shows and sell like 2,000 tickets a night." It's
Right.
not that straightforward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's levels to this shit.
Yeah. No, exactly.
To like put it
Yeah.
like lightly again, where it's like you kind of have to like earn your place in that world sometimes. And obviously every artist is different. There's been studies or like there's been people like case studies of people that were like they'll just blow up overnight and then they'll sell out theaters and then all of a sudden they're massive artists, but it's such like a low percentage of people that happens like that.
Yeah, and there's also like there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that people don't see as to
Yeah.
how how they're maneuvering in a certain way. So
Yeah.
like there are obviously a handful of artists that do that, but for every one of those, there's 100 that have done it the wrong way.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure. So then building up 1717, you guys have already had obviously your own successes and movies and or music and like sync license type stuff. And I guess moving and now you're getting into comedy and got some rising stars in comedy. And I wanted to ask like for 1717, what's the vision for like the next year and also kind of 5 years from now? Like where do you see 1717 moving?
Yeah, I mean the next sort of 12 months are pivotal for me in terms of growth. I want to continue expanding. The main thing is to make sure, at least over the next 12 months, where we have sort of expanded quite quickly,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that we now give the utmost care and attention to every artist. Obviously, like if we can bring on other artists at a high level, we will. But I want to make sure that the next 12 months we focus, where we've expanded. I want to give a lot of attention to that and make sure we're doing it the right way.
Mhm.
For like 5 years, the goal is to expand much more rapidly and across other areas as well. The long term goal has been to have a sort of department in each area that I have interest. We want the music department to obviously be a mainstay in the industry and a reputable management company. We want to expand the comedy side where we can sort of have the touring stand-ups that also maybe want to diversify into TV. But a big area that I'm looking to do within the next 5 years is move into sports.
Oh, love it.
But there's a lot of complication that comes with that. Like every board has their own criteria. Every sort of like professional sports body has their own system. And you've effectively got to get licensed in each one. In order to be able to represent either as an agent or a manager. Like NFL has specific criteria that are different from the NBA, that's different to the NHL, that's different to MLS, and you have to get qualified in all of those. And there's a lot of license fees involved. So,
sure.
You have for every, I think like with the PGA, where we've looked at turning my obsession with my mediocre golf game into actually representing golfers. The PGA doesn't necessarily have a ton of criteria outside of taking the exam that they want you to take, but you have to pay a license fee and a fee for every golfer that you represent that year as well. So,
like a yearly fee?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there is a sort of inherent cost associated with representing athletes in each sort of sport as well. So there's it's a slower process to expand into that, and also like we don't have a reputation there yet. World, yeah. So be looking to build that from the ground up. It's going to take some time
for sure.
But the goal is there, and the sort of long-term plan is there. But at the same time, I still want to keep expanding the music side of things. We don't want that to just sort of stay where it is. I want every department to grow alongside each other and grow to be at the same level.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, music is what started it all. And
exactly.
It's the bread and butter.
And it's still going to be the where most of my focus is.
Yeah.
I want to expand with other managers to do that great work, to afford me the ability to expand into these other areas.
For sure. And that comes with delegation and building the team, scaling it up.
And trusting those people with what you're doing.
For sure. Especially because you started this thing by yourself. It's like there's going to be a certain level where you do kind of take a lot more, steps back and oversee the managers doing their thing. And then you have the ability to have the conversations to be delving into these new industries and talk with maybe professionals in those worlds, bringing on managers that are already doing PGA stuff, NBA stuff, NFL stuff, where you can meet these people and not even have to like go down the path yourself without, experience in a sense.
That's it. Like if I can meet the right people that are already doing it and we can bring them on board, then great.
Boom.
There's just obviously there's a financial cost associated with that. Of course, so you have to sort of get yourself to a level where you can do that.
Yeah.
Pay their salary or pay those fees as a company. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, if I can meet those people that are already doing it independently, bring them on and have them help grow that side of the company, perfect.
Yeah, no, I love that so much, man. I mean, the fact that you already have the vision to build it up into a multi-industry team, I think that's the beauty of, entrepreneurs, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They see the vision 5 years from now, and it's like usually when you can see the vision, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've had those conversations with my partner where you sit down and you're like, okay, in 5 years' time, like this is the one thing that I want to achieve with this business. Like this is where I want to get. Now, how do I take the necessary steps to get there? You sort of like reverse engineer it. Like if I want to achieve that specific thing, how am I going to operate and navigate to get there?
Absolutely.
And then just sort of work backwards.
Absolutely. There's a I forgot what book it is. I think it's the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
Dude, okay. So you're talking about one of the things that they talk about, Stephen Covey, he talks about starting with the end in mind. And that's exactly what you mean. Where it's like you pick a goal first and then you reverse engineer. How do I get there?
Yeah, because I mean, like when you're trying to run a business like that, I mean, ultimately, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, you can sort of just go down the path and see what happens. But my personal belief is that I'm going to be a lot more effective if I pick something and then just sort of reverse engineer how I'm going to get there. And it's not that that's necessarily going to be exactly how it happens, but you at least create a path or an understanding for yourself about what you think is going to be the right idea.
For sure. Yeah. And having the goals in mind, I think that's really the key. It's just like if you don't have a a place where you want to get to, how are you going to get there?
Yeah,
If you don't even know where you're going.
There are managers out there, I'm sure, that are sort of just like, cool, let's just see what happens. And like, if I land there, I land there.
Tough.
And that's great. But like, what's the goal with that?
For sure.
Like what is it that you're are you just trying to become a successful manager and just sort of like hope that happens?
So vague.
Yeah. Like I'm sure that there are plenty of people that have done it and it's worked for them, but it's just not how I typically approach things.
For sure. And I mean, the fact that you've been in this industry for so long, like you've been very definitive on what you would like to do. And I think that's important when it comes to being an entrepreneur and a business owner that's running a successful team. You need to have that type of vision, you know?
Yeah. And I think, the people that I bring on board have to see that in me as well. If they want to come on board and they think that they can grow with our company, they need to feel like you can, I guess, afford them that same opportunity, and they need to feel like you can sort of take control of that situation and feel comfortable that they're coming to a company that will help them and take charge of a situation.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, it probably makes them feel a lot more comfortable that you have so much confidence in, like, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to do it. And like that gives them a direction in the sense of like, okay, like we're good. Like we're going to be
probably an unhealthy confidence too. Like, I don't know. I feel like I have this conversation all the time, and it's like, it's not out of like arrogance or anything like that. It's just that like, I firmly believe that we're capable of achieving this.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that, like everyone around me knows, like, this is what we're going to do together.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, that confidence is so necessary. And I think in business specifically, I mean, in entertainment, it's such a like every day some shit can change. So it's like the fact that you have like the goals in mind, so that way when things do change, you can pivot to keep trying to get to that goal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like you can set those goals, and like they might change over time, or you might have to adjust things, but like you have to be able to pivot on a dime. We work in a creative industry. Things change rapidly. The even little things, right? Like chart registrations for artists. Over the years, that's the, I guess, like the definition of a sale has changed massively, and artist teams have had to pivot, because it used to be like 100 and I think it was like 150 streams for a unit sale, like on an album, and now that's changed to 1,500 because someone sort of like broke the system, and then artist teams all had to completely change how they approach that, or like bundles for things. Whenever you, like, as a fan, if you buy an artist bundle with like a t-shirt and an album or whatever, like there's specific rules about how that qualifies as a sale for the album. And you'd have rappers out there that were doing like $10 t-shirt and CD bundles and just selling thousands of copies, and then chart registrations turn around and like, yeah, we're going to change that. And then artist teams have to completely pivot how they do things. Like there's new standards and new practices all the time, and you have to be able to move with that.
Yeah, dude, that's such an important like little thing. That's such a big thing, because the unit sale, once streaming kind of came into play, because back in the day, one album was one unit. You know what I'm saying? Like one physical
you know
album.
exactly what you're selling.
So it's like, but now we're in with the streaming era, that's 1,500 streams just to get one album sale is a very different metric. And, this was like 20 years ago, it was a very different system. So it's like, now it's like, next year the shit could change.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to pivot with that, and like help your artists understand that like gold record is a very different thing now.
Yes.
I think if my quick math is correct, if it's not, it's gonna be embarrassing, but I think a gold record now in the US would mean that you have to generate somewhere in the region of like 750 million streams.
Jesus Christ.
If it's just digital.
And that back in the day, that was, if I'm not mistaken, it's 500,000.
What gold was? 500,000 units is a gold record.
Gold? Okay.
But yeah, if you convert it to digital, that would be 750 million streams for a gold record. Yeah, it's very, very different. Yeah.
I mean, the fact back in the day, it wasn't easier to sell 500,000 units, but at the same time, at least like if you sold 500,000 albums, you got the plaque for 500,000 units. Versus now, you got to get 750 million streams just to get.
Yeah, I mean, like
it's
just a different process, right? Like, I mean, like 500,000 units was a lot for any band.
Yeah,
it's just that like you buy the album, that's the unit. Now, people's consumption has changed, and you're not gonna stream that album necessarily 1,500 times and equate to one unit. So it's like it's very different, and those are all the things that change. Like I've seen the rise of streaming, I guess, like because of the length of career now and like the timing of when I've been in the industry. I've seen the introduction of streaming and then how that's changed the industry. And it's like for better and for worse and different things. But you have to pivot with that all the time. There's going to be a new standard for something.
Yeah.
Like probably every year.
Absolutely. And are you familiar with like Russ? I mean,
yeah.
I love Russ. I've watched his journey from the beginning, and a lot of people say I look like him when I have my hair done.
I guess I see it. Yeah, I see it.
I'm probably gonna do him for October for Halloween.
Oh, amazing! Perfect.
Do a little draw tattoos on his.
I love that.
But
so I went as my cousin one time to his own Halloween party. I drew on all of his tattoos and like dressed exactly like him, to the point where his wife tapped me on the shoulder and she's like, "Oh, motherfucker." I was like, just play on that one. So that would be a good one.
Yeah, dude. So Russ though, he's obviously been very what's the word that you use for Zach? Just like
fiercely independent.
Russ has been fiercely independent from the beginning.
And very outspoken about it too.
Very outspoken from the beginning of his career. And I think that's something he's very transparent with his fans. And he's always, even when he did sign a Columbia deal, he was like showing him signing the deal, and everything was super transparent. And that's something that he still does to this day, where even, when he got out of the deal, bought his masters back, or got control of everything. But he got to a point recently, he was doing a few interviews talking about this album that's about to come out. And he was talking about when he was doing the rollout for the album where it was like a drawing of him. I forgot what it was called, but it was the one where he was doing like $8 vinyl sales or something like that. And he was talking about it where, because he like incentivized people to buy the album, it didn't count as an album sale.
Yeah. So they had changed a few of the like standard and regulations for things. So the most recent was basically like, if you sold a bundle, like whatever item it was, and you bundled it with the record, you have to sell that item individually on the store at full price. And then the bundle has to be the same price of that item with a minimum, I think it's $3.29, with a minimum of $3.29 added to the price of that item for the bundle for it to qualify.
Oh my gosh.
And then there's like other things where like you used to be able to attach like a digital copy of an album to a physical. That doesn't count anymore.
Interesting.
So, and it's usually because artists sort of like see the rules, bend them a little bit to increase the unit sales and increase the consumption, and then Billboard or Luminate, who do all the chart registrations, will look at it and be like, okay, yeah, we see that, we're gonna adjust that now.
It's like, thanks for pointing that little loophole out. We're gonna go ahead and close that up.
Like where us like incentivized fans in a certain way, like there are certain things that just basically like don't qualify that for a unit sale.
Wow.
So and that is something that changes basically every year. Like an artist will find a new way to sort of manipulate what's going on.
Totally.
And they go, yeah, okay, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So
wow. So I mean, that's the thing though. It's like working in this industry, you have to be in tune with those changes, especially when you're managing artists' career. You have to be the one that like is on top of that shit. Especially like the artist shouldn't be finding that out before you're even bringing that up.
Yeah, and like when you're working with record labels, obviously the labels see that information all the time as well. But you have to work together and understand it and be like, okay, right, if this is the change that's coming to play, here's what we're going to do differently, or let's come up with a different structure. It's the same thing that's happened with like TikTok becoming like a music tastemaker. We've all had a sort of pivot in terms of how we promote, how we do things. That's changed the whole dynamic. it was sort of like, I use a reference with artists a lot, where the introduction of something like TikTok and how people are now sort of having to be like social media influencers as well as artists in order to get people to care. It was the same sort of thing as like MTV when that came about. You know, artists in the 60s and 70s are like, why am I going to film a music video for my music? Like, people don't want to watch a video for my music.
Right.
And then every song that's going on MTV becoming a #1 song, everyone's like, oh, we need to make music videos now. Like, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's the same with TikTok. Like, artists that, you
Right.
know, will be sort of like alien to change,
For
right?
sure.
And especially incumbent successful artists, they see it and they're like, I don't have to do that.
It's not my thing.
Yeah. And then you see all the artists generating success from it. Like, a really great example of like rock bands that pivoted the right way with TikTok was Papa Roach.
Mm-hmm.
They could have very easily just used it, you know, the introduction of these new platforms. They could have just been like, cool, another one.
Right.
They're an older band
For sure.
that, you know,
Legacy.
make plenty of money still and sell a lot of tickets. But they saw it as an opportunity to be like, okay, great, let's connect with even more people or reconnect with our fans. And like, this is what everyone's doing. We're going to do it too. And Jacoby in that band has been like at the forefront of that for Papa Roach. He's like constantly creating content for the band and for himself.
Right.
And I personally look at it and see that that's probably the reason why they're still selling like 5,000 tickets a night.
20 years in the game.
Yeah, you know, like there's a reason why they're still really successful, because they were willing to make that change. And there are plenty of other artists out there that don't want to do it.
Yeah.
They don't want to meet that change, and then, you know, wonder why their career isn't growing or why it's staying the same or shrinking. You know, like you have to be able to pivot at any point.
Yeah.
Who knows, like, you know, like when that next like app or change is going to come about, and like that's going to be the new thing that defines success for artists.
Yeah, for sure. The adaptability, I think, is the biggest thing when it comes to like working in any entertainment world. I mean, music, movies, TV, they all have that same nature of like things can shift on a day-to-day basis type shit, where it's like, well, you can be doing things one day and then next week you have to change how you do things completely. And I think that's something that like you have to have that within you and be willing to adapt in a positive way, of course, you know, and like do things to like work with within how you used to do things, but then just like adapt to like grow with the company or with the platforms rather than against the you know the wave or whatever. Michael Minnelli is you know Michael, that was one artist where Zach's talked about. I don't know if you watched his podcast episode, but he talks about how early in Michael Minnelli's career, well, I guess not like super early, but before he got successful, Zach started working with him, and he recognized something in Michael Minnelli that he might not have seen in himself. And Zach very early on told Mike to get on TikTok, get on Instagram Reels. And Mike was like, I'm not doing that trendy bullshit. And then it was just like, he just started like, all right, I'll listen to you. Started posting a little bit, getting no views, posting every day. Almost got to a point where he was like discouraged. He's like, oh no, this is not working. This is embarrassing. I got to delete this. And Zach's like, nope, just fucking keep going. And then it was like within like a year, he just started getting just tens of thousands of followers. And then all of a sudden it's like grows. I mean, now look at Michael Minnelli, like his whole brand is making social media reels. And now he's getting like Popeyes and all these different brand collaborations, working with Sony directly. And I mean, over the last like 6 months with his pick up the headphones thing that he does on the street, he's got like 500, 600,000 followers in like less than a year. Like that's the power of social media.
Yeah, and it's the consistency needed. Like we talk about it with our artists all the time, where like if you you'll see it a lot with like smaller local bands, right? Like they come around the like a release of a single or an album they want to drop, whatever it is,
right?
And they'll post in like clusters.
Yeah,
they'll post around like the time that the single's coming out, but they're not posting every day, and they wonder why there's no growth. The biggest thing that we can tell our artists to do is like whether you're the kind of person that posts like every day or every like 3 times a day for some of them, or once every 4 or 5 days, it doesn't necessarily matter what your like way of doing things is, as long as you are consistent with that approach. So if you're someone that started posting every day, you need to continue posting every day, because otherwise you're basically just hitting reset when you stop. And then the algorithm that we all have to pay attention to and are slaves to, I swear.
That word algorithm.
Yeah, it's like the bane of everyone's life. That will essentially, I mean, like it resets for you, and so like the consistency is the biggest thing that every artist needs to stick with and follow. If you're not going to do that, then you can't be surprised by the lack of success that's facing you. Like Manelli is a great example of someone where like you saw the results because you stuck with it.
Yeah.
And you try and preach that to artists where possible. And some are receptive, some aren't. I managed for a good chunk of time an artist called TX2, who is so painfully consistent with content. And whether you like the type of content that he puts up there, ultimately it's like very rage baity, right? And you can be a fan of it or not, but you can't disagree with the fact that he's developed this consistency and fan base because of that approach. And that's something that a lot of artists need to focus on and understand. Like, not it doesn't work for every artist. You're being the person that posts every day, or like the artists that you see out there that like 3 reels a day. Like that can be a lot. You might be someone that just every 3-4 days works for you, but you still need to follow that rhythm to everything.
For sure. Yeah. And that, Caleb kind of talked about like basically the way that he said it was like, if you post every day for a year, like you're gonna find success in that. And I think kind of like piggybacking off of like what he was saying, but then also like with what you're saying is it doesn't necessarily have to be every day, but as long as it's on a consistent basis.
Yeah, that is really the biggest thing, right? Like I have an artist right now who is doing extremely well, and they don't post every day.
Right.
But they're very consistent with the sort of like cadence of their social media.
That makes sense.
They have a specific way of doing things, but because they still stick to it, it does very well for them.
Yeah.
And ultimately he's growing exponentially because he's still being consistent with it.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a flip side that you can kind of get into where some people are ultimately viewed as like only a social media type person, and it doesn't relate to the streaming. Like it doesn't convert to what we call like the DSPs like Spotify and Apple, and there's a whole other side of that to sort of like get into and understand what that is. But ultimately, if you're trying to find some semblance of success, the regularity of posting is so important.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, the power of social media is it's not going anywhere,
No.
So I think if anything, it's just expanding into more platforms. And I mean, we were talking about this with Caleb, like how Twitch, even now, how successful it's even more now than it ever has been.
Yep.
And with the Kai Cenats of the world and those types of people. And once they get like a short form platform, like it's over, like they're gonna get that eventually. YouTube Shorts now.
That's it. I mean, like there's new platforms all the time. Obviously, like, understanding what one is gonna become like the new sort of standard is not necessarily that easy. But the moment that you start to see it, you have to pivot. I mean, like those like the Kai Cenats of the world, and like they sort of, I feel like I'd never heard of him.
Right.
And then one day, just everywhere.
Overnight success, as they say. But then you look back and like, oh, he's been doing
like
this.
It's like the original like YouTubers and stuff, right? Like the KSIs and the Paul brothers. Like you look back at their like original videos, I'm pretty sure, I think like KSIs was like just like in his bedroom playing FIFA or whatever. And now these guys are multi-millionaires with huge sort of like business empires. And it all comes out of just sticking with it and being consistent with that schedule. Like those YouTubers would never be what they are if they did not do it every day. Like like David Dobrik, like
for sure,
a blog every day for however long that was. But ultimately, now look at the platform that they have.
Totally, yeah, and to do it with like a mindset of like, this is going to help me in the future, even though like, because all those guys that you're talking about, like they weren't making money the first day. It's like they were just posting just for like that exercise of putting it out and doing it. And I think that's the process of like in that process of working it out, and just even just like this podcast, like there's like there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's like I said earlier, where it's like building up the systems and being able to just do it over time.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna eventually get to a point where it's so easy and it's not that hard to do. But I do feel like being consistent in like 5 years from now, I'll look back and be like, oh wow, like we're in a totally different
Yeah,
place because we
exactly.
stuck with it.
There's always gonna be the creator or the artist or whatever that like doesn't have to do that. There's always gonna be the ones that just sort of like they catch that wave and, like there it is. They've done like 2 episodes of something or released 1 song and it just, it blows up massively. There's always gonna be those artists, right? But you have to behave as if that's not gonna happen to you. You
Yeah.
have to still be consistent. Like there's the like Alex Cooper and her like
Oh
Call Her
yeah, yeah.
Daddy podcast.
Right,
I'm like,
right.
that caught wind so quick.
Absolutely, yeah.
But not everyone is gonna get that,
Yeah.
right? And then even when that did happen, she was still incredibly consistent with what she did.
Mhm.
That and that what you're seeing off the back of that is obviously the success she has now. And it's the same with like any artist, any creator, whatever it is you're doing on whatever platform, you have to ultimately behave as if that is not going to happen to you. If it
Mhm.
does, great. I'm sure you can pivot in that moment and understand how to do that. But you have to create the consistency and essentially do that work every day
For
if
sure.
you plan on having that level of success.
For sure. For long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, that's great advice for any creatives, and creators watching this. It's very important to be consistent, but also adapt with the trends and
Yep.
be able to move in certain directions, even if it's not like natural for you. So I want to talk about a recent life event. You
Yeah.
recently became a father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
man. So I mean, obviously that's a big change in your life.
Yeah.
So I wanted
Yeah.
to talk about balancing running a company, having employees, also doing artist management, but then having a family. How do you balance those lives?
Well, I mean, I don't sleep anymore, and I consume like 14 more cups of coffee than I used
Yeah,
to.
absolutely.
No, I honestly, it's sort of weird. I was having this conversation the other day with one of my friends, and they were asking basically the same question. It was like how is it? How is that going? And I don't think I planned on it, but when my daughter was born, it sort of just flipped a switch for me, and I didn't know that I had it, but I just sort of found another gear. Like you, ultimately, you have to, right? That you like you. I became a father, and it just sort of happened.
Mhm.
I couldn't really explain it. It just was sort of like, okay, I'm responsible for this human being now. I need to deliver, and I just found another gear to operate in that I
Wow.
didn't know I had. I already thought I was putting a lot of work in and trying to do what I needed to do to grow, but then it was just like, no, there's a whole other reason now. And
Wow.
she just sort of like fueled that where I'm like, okay, now I need to be aggressive about it and like really provide for this girl. And it's exhausting. I'm not gonna lie. It is
Of course.
tiring. And
Of
there are days
course.
where you wake up and you're like, I do not want to do this. But then you look down and you see her, you see a little baby smiling back, and you're like, "Fuck, I have to."
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
Wow.
like,
Yeah, dude, that's such like a primal thing though,
yeah,
I feel like when you say like it kind of just came out of you and like there's another gear that just came out of nowhere. I think that's such a important piece to it cuz becoming a father, I'm not a father yet, but like becoming a father that changes everyone's lives if they're not in the entertainment industry. So it's just
yeah. I mean,
like
yeah, it's a
to
huge life moment for anyone in
yeah,
any walk of life, right? And
exactly.
I think a lot of parents would say the same thing, no
For
matter what they're
sure.
doing. Like,
Exactly.
you find the ability to take care of it.
Yeah.
With running a business and working on the creative side, it poses different challenges.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I look at it, I'm like, I need to provide for my daughter, so I'm gonna do whatever it takes to do that. The gear that I found, I couldn't even describe the moment. You just sort of like woke up one day and I'm like, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's do this.
for sure.
And and it's rewarding. Like, I hope that like what I'm building, that means that I can continue to provide for her. But yeah, the sort of like primal instinct that kicks in did not necessarily believe anyone when they said that that's what happened to them. You're like, cool, okay, yeah, awesome,
Yeah,
and then it happens to you, and you're like, oh, this is what they're talking
it's
about. Like
real.
this is exactly what they were describing. If I could do anything differently, though, it would be to have taken the advice from one of my other friends in the industry who has a couple children, and he told me, he's like, get all the sleep you can now before she's born, because you will not get it again. And I was like, nah, come on, dude. I was like, it's fine. Like, I sleep plenty right now. No, those first few weeks, I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. I should have absolutely listened to him. I should have like charged my battery up, because this is exhausting. You
Yeah,
just sort of wake up in the middle of the night, like first few weeks, like she feeds like it was like every 2 hours. Yeah, we had to feed her, and like all through the night, and you sort of 3 a.m. you look over at each other and you're like, oh, we can do this. We
yeah.
can do that. I wish I'd have followed his advice. So if Yusuf, if you see this, I should have listened.
You were right.
You were absolutely right, my friend. Yeah, he warned me. He was like, you're not. Either you think you're getting sleep now. He's like, take every nap you can, get all the sleep, because it's going to be very different. And he was right.
Yeah,
He
man.
was right.
For sure, bro. It's beautiful that you're able to do both successfully. Run a team, have a company, but then also have the time to be able to spend time with your girl and your daughter now. And to have a newborn is it's a full-time job. So
Yeah.
it's like, so while working another full-time job and also doing that, it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
will
that's
say, like,
amazing.
I have a great partner, and she picked up so much slack on maternity leave, and it was so great. She's back at work now, though, and
Yeah.
I am looking after her like during the day while working, and that was a new challenge. We sort of got into a rhythm when we had maternity leave, and then now that that's over and that sort of honeymoon period is gone, like, okay, all right, this
This
is
is
fine.
real.
But yeah, it's manageable. Again, like
Yeah,
you find a way.
absolutely.
I wasn't necessarily expecting it, and it was there was a little bit of dread for the first week that I knew that that Steph, my partner, was going to be back at work. But you just sort of find your rhythm again,
For
make
sure.
those adjustments, and again, it's like I was talking about, that finding another gear. Like, you just make it happen because you have to.
For sure. Yeah. It lights a fire under you that nothing else could do like that. It's another human.
I will say, everyone has been very understanding. Like, every meeting I have, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, if my daughter starts crying, like, there's nothing I can do about it. And they're
Yeah.
just like, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
what are we gonna say? Like, no, meeting's over. Like,
Yeah.
cancel. Like, no.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's very understanding about it.
For sure. That's beautiful. I think that's something that a lot of people are scared of starting a family, especially in the entertainment industry, because they have to give up their life to whatever. But that's not necessarily the case. You can do it successfully. It just does take getting into that extra gear, putting that extra work in, being very strategic with your time,
Yeah.
delegating probably more tasks to your staff.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to sort of be okay with giving up some control, something historically terrible at. Like, I really like to be in charge of what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
and do things my way. I'm very sort of stubborn, I guess, in a way. Thanks, Dad. You wonder if anyone wonders where I get it from. But that was something that I think has like helped me understand how I want to move through my business as well, because I was sort of forced to delegate certain things
Mhm.
where ordinarily I would never have done that.
Yeah.
It, I think, makes the guys that have come to work with me feel valued as well, because they know
Absolutely.
that, like, I'm putting that trust in them. Obviously, if they fuck something up, they're gonna know about it.
Yeah.
But for the most part,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, they sort of they feel like they're getting that value, like they feel like they're being appreciated, because I'm like, I trust you to do this job now,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of forced to delegate more than I have in the past. But like, every time you expand or do take something more on, I think you have to, if you're going to be successful as a company owner, you have to be okay with delegating those tasks because you physically cannot do it all yourself. At least if you want to be at a certain level, like you have to find the right people. You have to know what that looks like and know, when to give something up to someone else to make it work properly.
Absolutely. That's the key right there is almost having like the foresight for where you want to take the company, but also understanding that you will have to take a step back and let
Yeah.
people run it if you want it to be there.
And that's part of the timing of like when I started it, because I felt like I finally got to a place where I understood myself.
Yeah.
And could be like, okay, now I feel like I can be okay delegating and giving some of this responsibility up to someone else. If I'd have tried to do that before, I don't think I'd have done it in the same way or been like even remotely successful at it, because I would have been too controlling about what I was trying to do and get it perfect myself.
Yeah.
That was the timing of starting the company. I felt like I'd understood that better about myself and how to make peace with it.
For sure. And now having a child kind of forces you into an uncomfortable space, having to delegate even further.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful, man. So like as we wrap up, I do want to talk about the future with 1717. You guys kind of got some projects. I know Charlie Mack's on tour. Wyatt Fugredo, that's Caleb's guy. He's on tour.
Yeah, the comedians are all touring.
Yep.
Musically, I'm like, there's a lot of great stuff going on for our artists right now. I have an artist who I absolutely love, Warlord Colossus. Everyone sort of does a double take when they hear the name because they're like, I'm sorry, what? He's absolutely crushing it right now. We have a couple new songs that he has a song out right now, 777K, which is awesome. He's such a talented guy in the sort of like shadow rap world. He's got music coming out. We've got Luya is about to. He just finished a tour, but Luya's got new music coming out. Rose got music coming out. Sort of like folk country artist Ryman has music coming out. Like everyone is sort of like in this release cadence right now. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff. Like all of our artists are busy. They're either about to tour or have just finished touring and music's coming out. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, what a good feeling, man. I mean, you guys kind of started kind of in recently, at the end of 2023. I feel like you're still a very young company. So to already be having the successes that you guys have had, I think that's super exciting. And you guys are only up from here. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to keep growing. The first 12 months of the company with a limited roster, our artists did 400 million global streams.
That's
and
insane.
The goal is to, within the next sort of 12 months, get that roster in a place where we can do 1 billion streams across the roster in 12 months.
Nice, dude. Dude, I love it. I mean, the goals are in place, the people are in place, your mindset is right. It's awesome to be able to talk to someone that has been doing it for so long, but continues to keep the mindset.
Always something to learn.
Yeah,
always
dude.
more that you can do and more that you can learn, and just that's the one thing that I try and put focus on is just like keep learning from the people around you.
Absolutely, man. No, I love that. And that's something that I talk about with a lot of people. And, never stop learning, never become like the master, because the masters will continue to learn. They're always pivoting, they're always adapting to the new things that are coming out. And yeah, man, I love this. It's been such a great conversation. I feel like this has flown by. This is for real.
No, I appreciate you having me and talking about it. There's not usually a lot of opportunity to talk about these things, so it's been great to do that.
Absolutely, man. And my fellow Martians, you got to go follow Tim. It's at Tim Leftwich. I'll put his handle right here. Go follow 1717 MGMT on Instagram. Follow all their artists. As we're talking about them, I'll put their albums up and their names and all that stuff, so you guys can, keep track of what they're doing. They're on a high trajectory. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen within the next 1 to 5 years from now. So I'm happy to, have talked to you now, so that 5 years from now we can look back and be like, dang, all that stuff we are talking about.
Yeah, we'll revisit this in 5 years.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have Tim Leftwich Part 2.
Yeah, let's do it.
My fellow Martians, thank you again so much for watching. Go follow Tim. Go follow at On Mars Pod, and we'll see you next time on Mars. Love you. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this episode of the On Mars Pod, and for sticking around to the end, man. I really appreciate you guys. You are the real Martians. Like this video, comment below what your favorite part was, what was most inspiring to you. Subscribe to the channel, Hit that bell for notifications here on future interviews coming out soon. And also follow us on Instagram at OnMarsPod. Love you guys so much. We will see you next time on Mars.